Good morning. Today we're talking about deafness. About 15% of American teenagers have some degree of hearing loss, which means probably going to happen in your classroom. Deafness is not just a medical condition. For many people, it is also a cultural identity. Hearing impairment is another of the 13 disabilities. So what is the difference between hearing impairment and deafness? Deafness is more severe. A person is considered deaf when their hearing loss is severe enough, typically 70 decibels or more, that they cannot process spoken language through hearing. Even with hearing aids or other assistive technology, the ear is not a functional channel for language input. So the difference in your classroom can look like a student who is hearing impaired may still rely on spoken language as their primary mode. They might use hearing aids and follow along with some support. A student who is deaf, on the other hand, typically cannot use hearing aids as a primary channel at all, regardless of technological aid. Now, sometimes you may see deaf written with a capital D. That's intentional. Capital D deaf refers to the cultural identity, a community of people, often ASL users, who share language and history and values. And lowercase deaf is the audiological descriptor, it's the condition. Many deaf people prefer to be called a deaf person rather than a person with hearing loss, because for them, it's not a loss, it's who they are. And this goes back to a lot of deaf culture and how it's developed. So the distinction matters because it changes how we approach the relationship and the language with that student. Because we need to think we're not fixing a deficit, we are providing access to that student. So I'm going to go over 5 characteristics of a student with deafness. Number 1 is going to be language and communication. So deaf students may use American Sign Language or ASL or cued speech or spoken language or some combination of these. ASL is a complete grammatically independent language, not a manual version of English. A student who is a native ASL user is in many ways a bilingual learner, and they are navigating an English dominant educational environment. Number 2 is literacy. Reading and writing in English can function as a second language for ASL users. And this means some deaf students may read below grade level, not because of cognitive ability, but just because of limited exposure to English as a language. And this is a critical distinction. We don't want to confuse literacy challenges with low intelligence. Number 3 is speech. So students who were born deaf or lost hearing before acquiring language, we call this prelingual deafness. They may have speech that is difficult or unfamiliar to listeners who aren't familiar with it. Or they may not use speech at all. Students deafened after they acquired language, we call this postlingual, often retain intelligible speech. And neither one is better or worse, they're just different. Number 4, social and emotional factors. In a mainstream school, a deaf student may be one of the very few and sometimes the only deaf person in the building. And that isolation is real. Secondary students are navigating identity at the same time they're navigating academics. And for a deaf teenager in a hearing school, that can be additional hardship, an additional challenge. Number 5 is assistive technology. So your student may use hearing aids or a cochlear implant or an FM system, or they might not use any technology at all. A cochlear implant deserves special mention. It is not restored hearing. It provides electrical stimulation to the auditory nerve and gives access to sound. But the experience is very different from typical hearing. And the outcomes widely vary. So we should not assume that a student with a cochlear implant that they hear fine, because it's a different sort of signal. So now I want to go over 5 strategies to use with students with deafness. Number 1 is preferential seating. Your deaf student should sit at the front and center with clear sight line to your face. And if there's an interpreter, a clear sight line to the interpreter as well. I'm going to keep them away from HVAC or doors or other sources of background noise, because those can interfere. You don't want them in the back here. You want them right up close. Number 2 is to face your class. It sounds simple, but it's easy to forget. So never speak while writing on the board, and never talk toward a screen. Never address the class from across the room with your back turned. Lip reading and facial expressions and body language are all important parts of communication, and they only work when the listener can see your face. So if I'm here and I'm talking and I'm teaching from this side of the board, I mean, you can even barely hear what I'm saying right now, right? Number 3 strategy is visual supports every day. So write the day's agenda on the board, and write key vocabulary on the board, and write instructions on the board. And if you're giving multi-step directions verbally, post them visually too. Have illustrated cards with all the steps in it. Number 4 is working with an interpreter. So if an educational interpreter is in your room, the most important rule is to speak to the student and not to the interpreter. You say, "Can you explain that again?" Not, "Can you ask her to explain that again?" The interpreter is a communication bridge, not a representative. And also speak at a natural pace. Don't slow down excessively or stop frequently. Interpreters are trained and they're professionals, so trust them, they got it. Number 5 is note-taking. Use strategies for note-taking. A deaf student cannot lip read or watch the interpreter and write notes at the same time, right? You experience that when you're watching anime and you look away and suddenly the subtitles are gone. So the overarching principle is that access is not the same as the accommodation. We're not lowering the bar for these students. We're removing a barrier between capable students and the content. You can expect the same rigor, just provide the right conditions. And this is key to understanding disabilities in general. So for me personally, I'm going to be a woodshop teacher. So how I would use some of these things is safety communication is a top priority. In a shop, a missed instruction can mean an injury. So I cannot rely on shouting across a loud room. I need to have strategies in place. So before the term starts, I need to establish a clear visual emergency signal with my deaf student and with my whole class. That can be flicking the lights. If you have a flashing light, that works great. If you don't, then a deliberate large wave into the student's sight line works. But I need to make sure that they know what it means, and I need to practice it, test it, and solidify that it works. Another strategy that I need to be aware of as a woodshop teacher is demonstrations and station instruction cards. So I need to have everything there right up close, and the deaf student has a sight line for the demonstrations that I'm doing. Another one is hearing protection. So if they have a cochlear implant, then and there are loud noises around, then you need a plan for if they remove it, where is it going to go, and have accountability, especially if these are middle school students who tend to lose things. Another big consideration is peer protocol for emergencies. So for me, that would look like all of my students having an awareness of when I'm speaking. Just be aware of the deaf students and tap them on the shoulder, point at me, so that everyone knows when instruction is happening, and especially if there's an emergency, so that everyone can be safe in the event of it. So that was a lot of information. Key principles is to not treat it like a deficit, but treat it like we are providing a bridge for these capable students to show their stuff, to show what they're made of, to not get in the way of their education with this disability, while not lowering the bar for them. So this is Deafness. Thank you.